What if the only thing standing between you and the life you want is fear you never learned to question? Every day, invisible fears shape your choices, shrink your confidence, and quietly design your future. But fear is not a life sentence. It's a system you can understand, retrain, and outgrow. In this video, you'll discover how fear really works inside your brain, how it controls your decisions, and the practical steps to turn it from a cage into fuel. This isn't about becoming reckless. It's about becoming free. I hope you find this information useful as you enjoy these clips. Let's dive right in. First, the hidden roots of fear. Why your brain traps you. Fear is not your enemy. It is your brain's oldest survival tool. Long before modern life, fear kept humans alive. It sharpened the senses, increased heart rate, and prepared the body to escape danger. The problem is that your brain has not evolved as fast as your environment. Today, the same system that once protected you from predators now reacts to emails, social judgment, failure, and uncertainty as if they were life-threatening threats. Your brain cannot easily tell the difference between a tiger in the wild and a risky decision in your career. At the center of this response is a small structure called the amygdala. It acts like an alarm system, constantly scanning for danger. When it senses a threat, real or imagined, it triggers a chain reaction before your logical mind has time to evaluate the situation. Stress hormones flood your body. Muscles tense. Breathing changes. Your brain shifts into survival mode. In this state, creativity, rational thinking, and long-term planning shut down. You are no longer choosing. You are reacting. What makes fear powerful is repetition. Each time you avoid something that scares you, your brain records that avoidance as a success. It learns that fear kept you safe, and it strengthens the pattern. Over time, this creates invisible walls. You begin to shrink your world without noticing. Opportunities look like threats. Growth feels dangerous. Comfort becomes a cage disguised as safety. But here is the hidden truth. Your brain is not trying to sabotage you. It is trying to protect you, using outdated instructions. Understanding this changes everything. When you recognize fear as a protective mechanism rather than a personal weakness, you stop fighting yourself. Instead, you can work with your brain, retraining it step by step. Fear loses its mystery, and once fear is understood, it becomes something you can guide, not something that controls you. Second, how fear secretly controls your daily decisions. Most people imagine fear as a dramatic emotion that appears only in extreme situations, but its real power is far quieter. Fear hides inside ordinary moments. It whispers instead of shouting. It influences what you say, what you avoid, who you become friends with, and even the goals you convince yourself are realistic. Because it operates silently, you rarely question it. You mistake fear for logic, caution, or personality. Every day your brain runs thousands of micro-decisions. Should you speak up in a meeting? Should you send that message? Should you try something new? Fear filters these choices before you are even aware of them. It predicts embarrassment, rejection, failure, or loss. To protect you, it nudges you toward the safest option. Staying quiet, staying familiar, staying small. The danger is not one big fearful decision. The danger is the accumulation of tiny safe choices that slowly shape a limited life. Fear is especially powerful when it disguises itself as comfort. You tell yourself you are being practical. You say, "This is just who I am." But often these statements are fear wearing a convincing mask. The brain prefers predictability over possibility. Familiar discomfort feels safer than unfamiliar opportunity. So you repeat patterns even when they make you unhappy, because uncertainty triggers the alarm system. The most surprising part is that fear can also influence positive decisions. You might overwork to avoid criticism. You might please others to avoid conflict. You might chase perfection to avoid judgment. From the outside, these behaviors look like ambition or kindness. Inside, they are driven by the same survival mechanism trying to prevent emotional pain. Awareness is the first act of freedom. When you begin to notice how fear quietly edits your choices, you interrupt its automatic control. A pause appears between stimulus and response. In that pause, you regain authorship of your actions. You do not eliminate fear. You outgrow its authority. And once fear is no longer the hidden director of your decisions, your life starts expanding in directions you once believed were impossible. Third, the science of courage. What happens inside you? Courage is often misunderstood as the absence of fear, but science shows the opposite is true. Courage is a biological and psychological process that happens while fear is still present. Inside your brain, a negotiation takes place between emotional alarm systems and higher reasoning centers. When you act courageously, you are not silencing fear. You are activating a stronger system that can stand beside it. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and self-control, plays a central role. When fear is triggered, the amygdala sends urgent signals that demand immediate safety. But the prefrontal cortex can step in and reinterpret the threat. It asks a critical question. Is this danger real, or is it discomfort? Courage begins the moment this rational voice stays active instead of shutting down. The stronger this pathway becomes, the more you can act intentionally under pressure. Your body also participates in courage. Hormones like adrenaline and cortisol rise during fear, but they are not purely negative. In balanced amounts, they sharpen focus and energize movement. Courage channels this energy instead of resisting it. Your heart races, but you move forward anyway. Over time, repeated exposure to feared situations trains your nervous system. The body learns that intensity does not equal catastrophe. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. Neuroscience calls this process neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself through experience. Each courageous action leaves a trace. New neural connections form, linking fear with successful survival rather than avoidance. Confidence is not a personality trait you are born with. It is a physical structure you build. The more often you choose action over retreat, the more automatic courage becomes. This is why small, brave acts matter. They are not symbolic gestures. They are biological training sessions. Every time you speak up, try again, or face discomfort, you are upgrading your internal circuitry. Courage stops being a rare, heroic moment and becomes a practiced state. And when courage becomes familiar, fear no longer feels like a wall. It becomes a doorway you know how to walk through. Fourth, breaking the fear loop before it breaks you. Fear becomes dangerous not when it appears, but when it repeats. The brain is a pattern machine. When a fearful experience leads to avoidance, your mind connects the dots. Fear, text tape, relief. That relief feels rewarding. It teaches your nervous system that avoidance works. This is the fear loop, a self-reinforcing cycle that grows stronger each time you choose short-term comfort over long-term freedom. At first, the loop seems harmless. You postpone a difficult conversation. You delay a decision. You step back from a challenge. Nothing catastrophic happens, and your brain celebrates survival. But slowly, the loop tightens. The situations that trigger fear multiply. Your tolerance for discomfort shrinks. What once felt manageable begins to feel overwhelming. The loop does not just protect you. It quietly redesigns your behavior around limitation. Breaking the loop requires interrupting the reward system. The key is not eliminating fear, that is impossible, but changing what your brain associates with success. When you move toward a feared situation and survive it, even imperfectly, you introduce a new ending to the pattern. Fear, action, growth. The brain updates its prediction model. It learns that discomfort is temporary and survivable. This is how the loop weakens. The interruption does not need to be dramatic. In fact, small exposures are more effective than giant leaps. Each controlled encounter with fear recalibrates your nervous system. Your body realizes that racing heartbeats and shaky hands are signals of activation, not signs of doom. Over time, the emotional charge fades. The loop loses its grip because the reward shifts from relief to mastery. What makes this process powerful is consistency. Fear loops are built through repetition, and they are dismantled the same way. Every intentional action becomes evidence that you are not trapped. Momentum replaces paralysis. The loop that once shrank your world begins to reverse direction. Instead of protecting you from life, your brain starts trusting you to handle it. And when that trust grows, fear stops being a prison and becomes a challenge you know you can outlast. Fifth, the one habit that shrinks fear every day. Fear rarely disappears in one dramatic moment. It fades through daily training. The single most powerful habit for shrinking fear is intentional exposure, the practice of facing small, controlled discomfort every day. This habit works because fear grows in avoidance but weakens in contact. Each time you approach what you once escaped, you send your brain a new message. I can handle this. The key is scale. The habit is not about reckless bravery or forcing yourself into overwhelming situations. It is about choosing challenges just slightly outside your comfort zone. A short conversation you would normally avoid, a task you keep postponing, a risk small enough to attempt, but meaningful enough to stretch you. These micro acts of courage accumulate. They retrain your nervous system without triggering shutdown. When you practice daily exposure, your brain begins to separate discomfort from danger. At first, fear reacts loudly. Your heart beats faster, your thoughts race, and your body urges retreat. But when nothing terrible happens, the prediction error forces your brain to update. The alarm becomes less convincing next time. With repetition, situations that once felt impossible become routine. Confidence is not created by thinking differently. It is built by acting differently until your biology adapts. This habit also rewires your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who avoids fear and start recognizing a new pattern. You are someone who shows up. That shift is subtle but transformative. Identity drives behavior more strongly than motivation ever can. When courage becomes part of how you describe yourself, action follows naturally. The magic of this habit is consistency, not intensity. A small daily victory compounds faster than rare heroic efforts. Fear shrinks because your world expands a fraction each day. Over weeks and months, those fractions become a life that feels larger, freer, and more intentional. You do not wake up fearless. You wake up practiced. And practice is what turns courage from an effort into a lifestyle. 6. Rewiring your mind to feel safe and powerful. Feeling safe is not just a reaction to the outside world. It is a skill your brain can learn. Many people wait for perfect conditions before they allow themselves to feel confident or calm. But the nervous system does not automatically update based on circumstances. It updates based on repeated internal signals. Rewiring your mind begins when you deliberately teach your brain that safety can exist alongside uncertainty. Your nervous system is constantly scanning for evidence. If your thoughts are filled with worst-case scenarios, your body responds as if danger is already present. Muscles tighten, breathing becomes shallow, attention narrows. Over time, this state becomes familiar, and familiarity is mistaken for truth. The brain concludes, this is what life feels like. To change that conclusion, you must introduce new patterns of interpretation. One powerful method is controlled regulation of the body. Slow breathing, relaxed posture, and steady eye focus send feedback to the brain that conditions are stable. This is not pretending. It is biological communication. The brain listens to the body as much as the body listens to the brain. When you practice calming the physical response, you create a foundation where fear has less authority. Safety becomes a trained response rather than a rare accident. Mental rehearsal strengthens this rewiring. When you visualize yourself facing challenges successfully, The brain activates many of the same neural circuits used in real action. It begins to treat courage as familiar territory. Athletes use this principle to enhance performance. You can use it to build emotional strength. The mind does not fully distinguish between vividly imagined success and experienced success. Both leave structural traces. Power grows when safety and action coexist. You are not waiting for fear to disappear. You are expanding your capacity to function while it is present. Each time you regulate your state and move forward anyway, you send a new message. I am capable. With repetition, that message becomes embedded in your wiring. Confidence stops feeling forced. It feels natural, grounded, and steady. And when your brain learns that safety lives inside your response, not outside in perfect conditions, you carry power with you wherever you go. 7th, facing fear without forcing yourself. Many people believe the only way to defeat fear is through aggression. Push harder, ignore the feeling, overpower it. But forcing yourself often creates a hidden backlash. The nervous system interprets force as another threat. Instead of learning safety, it learns pressure. Fear does not disappear. It buries itself and resurfaces stronger. Real progress comes from cooperation with your mind, not domination of it. Fear is a signal, not a command. It carries information about perceived risk, vulnerability, and uncertainty. When you face fear gently, you acknowledge the signal without surrendering to it. This approach activates curiosity instead of resistance. You begin asking, what exactly am I afraid of? What story is my brain telling me? The moment fear is examined, it becomes more specific and less overwhelming. Vagueness fuels anxiety. Clarity reduces it. Gradual exposure paired with self-compassion is the balance point. You step forward, but you also stay emotionally supportive of yourself during the process. Instead of saying, I shouldn't feel this, you say, it makes sense that I feel this, and I can still move. That internal dialogue matters. The brain responds to tone. Harsh self-talk tightens fear. Understanding softens it. You create an environment where growth feels safe enough to attempt. This method builds trust between you and your nervous system. Each time you approach fear without violence toward yourself, you prove that discomfort will not be met with punishment. The body relaxes faster. Recovery becomes quicker. Fear loses its association with danger and gains a new association with learning. That shift changes the entire trajectory of progress. Facing fear without force transforms courage into a sustainable practice. You are not burning energy in short bursts of willpower. You are developing a steady relationship with challenge. The goal is not to become fearless overnight. The goal is to become someone who can stand beside fear without collapsing or attacking yourself. In that space of calm persistence, growth accelerates. Fear stops being an opponent you must defeat and becomes a teacher guiding you toward a stronger version of yourself. 8th, the confidence switch most people never discover. Most people wait to feel confident before they act. They treat confidence like a prerequisite, something that must arrive first. But the hidden switch is this. Confidence is not the cause of action. It is the result of action. The brain generates confidence after it collects evidence that you can survive difficulty. Until you give it that evidence, it has nothing to build on. Your mind is constantly running predictions. It asks, can I handle this? If your history is filled with hesitation and retreat, the prediction will be cautious, not because you are weak, but because your brain is using data. The confidence switch flips the moment you change the data stream. When you act while feeling uncertain, you inject new information into the system. You survive the moment. The brain updates its model. A tiny layer of trust forms. This is why confidence often feels mechanical at first. You are not waiting for emotion. You are choosing behavior. The emotional reward follows later. Each completed action becomes proof stored in memory. Proof compounds. Over time, your internal narrative shifts from, I hope I can, to, I've handled things like this before. That shift is subtle but neurological. It reflects a rewired expectation of capability. Another part of the switch is attention. Fear magnifies what could go wrong. Confidence redirects attention toward what you can control. Effort, preparation, recovery. When your focus moves from outcome to participation, pressure decreases. The brain performs better when it feels engaged rather than judged. Confidence grows in environments where mistakes are treated as data, not identity. The secret most people miss is that confidence is built in motion. It is not discovered through thinking alone. It emerges from repeated contact with reality. When you stop negotiating with fear and start collecting small victories, your brain has no choice but to adapt. Eventually, confidence stops feeling like a switch you must search for. It becomes your default setting, not because fear vanished, but because your mind now trusts your ability to walk through it. Ninth, small actions that destroy big fears. Big fears survive by looking bigger than your ability to face them. They grow in imagination, fed by distance and avoidance. The longer you keep a fear untouched, the more abstract and monstrous it becomes. But fear has a weakness. It cannot maintain its size when broken into pieces. Small actions shrink what the mind exaggerates. Your brain struggles to process huge, undefined threats, but it responds well to specific, manageable steps. When you reduce a fear into the smallest possible action, you turn something emotional into something practical. Instead of, "I'm afraid of failure," the action becomes sending one email, making one call, practicing for 10 minutes. These actions feel almost too simple, and that is exactly why they work. Simplicity bypasses resistance. Each small action delivers a psychological correction. The catastrophe your brain predicted does not happen. You survive. That survival weakens the fear's credibility. Over time, repeated corrections stack up. Fear loses authority not through argument, but through evidence. The nervous system trusts experience more than imagination. Small actions also create momentum. Motion generates motivation, not the other way around. When you act, even at a tiny scale, your brain releases dopamine, a chemical linked to reward and progress. This creates a positive feedback loop. Action feels good, so action becomes easier. What once required effort starts to feel natural. Big fears collapse under the steady pressure of consistent movement. The most important shift is identity. When you repeatedly take small, brave steps, you stop identifying as someone trapped by fear. You become someone who responds. That identity change multiplies your power. You no longer wait for courage to arrive in dramatic waves. You practice it quietly, daily, in ways no one else may even notice. And that is the hidden victory. Fear is not destroyed in grand gestures. It is dismantled in ordinary moments, where you choose movement over paralysis. Piece by piece, your world expands. What once felt impossible becomes familiar. And in the space where fear used to dominate, you find something unexpected, a growing sense of freedom built from the smallest decisions you chose to make. 10th, living bold, designing a fearless identity. A fearless life is not created by eliminating fear. It is created by designing an identity that is bigger than it. Identity is the invisible blueprint behind behavior. Every action you take is filtered through the question, what would someone like me do? If you see yourself as cautious, fragile, or easily overwhelmed, your choices will protect that image. But identity is not fixed. It is built through repetition and interpretation. Designing a fearless identity begins with redefining what boldness means. It is not recklessness or constant intensity. Boldness is consistency in the presence of uncertainty. It is the decision to participate fully in your own life. When you adopt this definition, courage becomes accessible. You do not need heroic moments. You need daily alignment between who you want to be and what you actually do. Your brain updates identity based on evidence. Every time you act in a way that reflects strength, honesty, or resilience, you cast a vote for a new self-image. One vote is small. Hundreds are transformative. Over time, the pattern becomes undeniable. You stop trying to become bold. You recognize that you already behave like someone who is. Identity shifts from aspiration to description. Language accelerates this process. The way you speak to yourself matters. Saying, "I'm trying to be confident," keeps confidence in the future. Saying, "I am learning to handle hard things," anchors growth in the present. The brain organizes behavior around the words you repeat. Clear, intentional language acts like a compass, pointing your actions toward the identity you are constructing. Living bold also requires tolerance for imperfection. A fearless identity does not mean flawless performance. It means refusing to let mistakes define your limits. Each setback becomes part of the architecture, not a reason to stop building. You measure progress by participation, not perfection. When identity changes, fear loses its central role. It becomes background noise instead of a command center. You still feel it, but it no longer negotiates your future. You move with it, not against it. And as that pattern stabilizes, bold living stops being a project you work on. It becomes the natural expression of who you believe you are.